Let's move on. Despite great hopes that she would be at the cenotaph for Remembrance Sunday, the Queen was forced to pull out of the event with a reported sprained back. This week she has resumed light duties but will likely be less visible between now and Christmas. Robert Hardman is a Daily Mail columnist and a biographer of Her Majesty, and he gave us his thoughts.
I think no one was more disappointed about the Queen's absence from the cenotaph than the Queen herself. I mean, she had very genuinely made every effort to be there. We were told for days in advance it was her, quotes, firm intention to be there. And it was a rather unsettling moment, I have to say, on Sunday morning at 9:18 as our phones pinged, and there was a statement from Buckingham Palace saying that she's very disappointed, but she'd sprained her back and with deep regret will not be coming. And obviously that sort of rippled through the crowd, and you know, this is 10,000 veterans there, all of whom had sworn allegiance to either the Queen or her father. They were genuinely concerned. It was an alarming moment. But actually, since then, I've spoken to people at the palace and around the Queen, and everyone's concerned, but there's no cause for great anxiety at the moment. This was something that was unexpected. It's not related to her recent trip to hospital. It was simply a very painful back. And to go to the cenotaph would have involved a 50-mile round trip in a car. Even if you're the Queen, even if it's a state Bentley, it's still a 50-mile round trip in a car. It would have involved standing up in the open air for around half an hour, which is, you know, trying. I mean, she's used to that. But when you've got all the cameras on you, everybody focusing on you, and you're 95, and your back's really hurting, it's not a really very satisfactory place to be. So I understand why the decision was taken. It was one of those precautions. I think what we're all having to do now is gradually come to terms with the fact that we have got the oldest head of state in the world, that she is in her 10th decade. I think because she's just been so dependable all these years that we've just come to take her for granted. I mean, perhaps the surprising thing really is not that she didn't make it to the cenotaph this year, but that she's been making it to the cenotaph for year after year after year ever since 1945. Nobody alive has been to the cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday more times than the Queen. I mean, it's 76 years since she laid her first wreath there. There aren't any more big events or indeed any events publicly announced in the diary between now and Christmas. So I have every confidence we will be seeing her on our screens at 3 p.m. on Christmas Day. Probably the next thing to look out for will be Christmas morning itself. Will she go to church at Sandringham, or will she prefer to attend a private service up at the house rather than make the journey and go up the steps into church? We'll just have to wait and see. But I'm told she's in very good spirits, and we will see her carrying on with what they call her light duties. That's her audiences with ambassadors over video, talking to the Prime Minister on a weekly basis. She still does that. And the one thing that she can't shake off, whatever happens, is her red boxes. They still turn up every night. She still goes through them all, and they still return the following morning. So until they stop, it's business as usual.
Robert Hardman there. Let's bring our panel back in now. Victoria, it really is starting to feel, isn't it, like the last couple of weeks we've moved into a real watershed moment where we're just not going to see the Queen as much anymore. Is that fair, do you think?
I think it has felt different to how things have been previously, and I think some of that is because over the last few years, you know, she has been scaling back. She doesn't do any overseas travel. She doesn't wear the imperial state crown at the stage opening of Parliament. Charles has laid the wreath at the cenotaph for a few years. So we've had a lot of gradual changes, but they've all felt very gradual, and they've all been done in a very controlled way, kind of managing this transition very slowly. But what we had a few weeks ago was her coming out and being incredibly busy, incredibly visible, of her own volition. I mean, you know, it's important to say that no one is asking anything of her that she doesn't want to do or that she isn't asking of herself. And then that had to be completely, very quickly rolled back on. And suddenly everything was off the table again, or all the engagements weren't possible.
And so suddenly on Remembrance Sunday.
Yes, exactly. And that's significant because they had teed up her being there. It's the one thing that, you know, it's considered so important in her diary. And so that it's felt a lot more jarring than it ever has done previously.
And it is a bit disconcerting, this sort of process of, you know, the family stepping in. We had Prince Edward stepped in for the first time in her entire reign when she didn't address the General Synod of the Church of England. And that was, interestingly, her role was taken by the Earl of Wessex, who read out a speech on her behalf. And we'll see more and more of that, I'm sure. But it does, I personally, I'm uncomfortable with this. I've said in this programme before, I would much prefer us to say to the Queen, you know, we are so grateful for your life of service. Please retire and
But do you not think that perhaps people have tried to broach that? And she's just so, you know, its duty is through her like a, you know, a stick of rock. And
possibly, but I'm not sure. I think, but as you say, I think if the Queen's determined to carry on, then we don't want to force her to do anything different.
But Victoria, do you think this adds another layer of tension to Platinum Jubilee plans and celebrations?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Platinum Jubilee plans have been in the works for some time now, and that is absolutely ongoing. I think there's probably a feeling that that is a moment that it's very important for her to be visible at, very important for her to be there at. But, you know, I remember in 2012 when it was her Diamond Jubilee, there was a sort of unspoken, obviously, sense, could this be the last major Jubilee? And here we are 10 years on and, you know, there's another one. I think that it's interesting what we've seen her in these speeches recently, sort of reminding us about no one being immune to the ageing process, these little lines that are dropped in that is very easy to read into. And then Charles being asked recently as well about it. And he said, so basically words to the effect of, she's 95, it's just not possible. And I feel like that kind of gives us a very strong sense of the direction now, that there is this wide acknowledgement of the fact she cannot be as visible or as busy.
I mean, the cheeky question is, I saw Piers Morgan on Instagram the other day saying he feels less and less confident in the party line, that it was a sprained back. Do you think that there is things that they're not telling us?
They're balancing this issue of her being very elderly and being entitled to medical privacy with her being head of state and when the public does need to know. I think it's probably fair to say that, you know, they're not going to release all the information. So there's probably lots of details that we're not aware of. But when it comes to the stuff that they do put out proactively, I don't think there's any reason to be questioning the accuracy of that. But I think it's just what else is going on that we're perhaps not fully getting and should we be getting, you know?
But I do think that whatever happens and whatever part the Queen can play in the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, they will be a great party. We'll be having our street parties across the country.